Let's talk for a second, because I think a lot of us have been sold a lot of lies, and not the obvious kind, but the kind that sounds like truth, but that slowly turns us all against each other. The whole red pill, blue pill narrative, men versus women, feminism versus masculinity, who's the problem, who ruins society. I want you to pause for a second and really think about this. Who actually benefits from us fighting each other like this? Evil doesn't choose one gender to work through, and ignorance doesn't pick a race. Selfishness doesn't check to see if you're a man or a woman before it destroys lives. There are women who harm people, and there are men who harm people. There are mothers who damage their children, and there are fathers who damage theirs. But every time something happens, we rush to blame an entire group of people for the mistakes of an individual. We say all women this or all men that. But let me ask you something. When you blame everybody, who actually gets held accountable? That's the conundrum we're in. Nobody is being held accountable, and that's the point. Most of us don't get to choose our environments. We don't choose our parents. We don't choose what we were taught or what we were exposed to as children. But there is one variable that every human being controls, and that is how we respond. That's the only thing that we have control over. And when people lose control of that, accountability, moral clarity, basic respect for others, everything starts to look the same. We normalize harm, and excuses replace responsibility. That's when people stop asking, is this right? And they start asking, how can I justify this behavior? And this is where people get trapped into choosing sides. But the truth is, and the truth that nobody wants to admit, is there are no sides. There is right and there is wrong. No matter who did it, there is right and there is wrong. Every broken relationship, every collapse, every betrayal comes back to choices. Love or the absence of it. Truth or denial. Look at the world right now. What you're seeing isn't random. It is the result of people refusing to look inside. People who are so consumed by their own pain, their own insecurity, that they are okay with everyone being just as miserable as they are. And misery does love company. We all know that. But misery also multiplies very rapidly. That's how entire societies end up drowning in the consequences of unhealed trauma and unchecked ego. I have seen this personally. I grew up in a home with a narcissistic parent. The selfishness, the self-centered behavior, the winning at other people's expenses. I've also had friends like that, and I have dated and married men the same way. Same behavior, different bodies. So I don't think that it's a gender issue. It's truly a character issue. People want a villain that they can point to and a group that they can demonize. They want a label that makes them feel like they are morally superior. But the real dividing line has never changed. Truth versus lies, good versus evil. And when people refuse to live in reality, they don't just deny the truth, they deny the consequences of their own actions. That's how power-hungry men and women rise. That's how manipulation becomes normal. And that's how people control. That's how control starts in families and spreads into society. Parents, siblings, and homes. Those are our first classrooms. And if people never healed what they learned there, they go out into the world repeating it, hurting others and calling it strength, calling it survival, and calling it just the way that life is. But that is not living. That is conforming. And when you live for approval instead of truth, you are not alive. You are obedient. You are shrinking yourself to fit narratives that were never meant to free you. So I just want to ask, and I want you to really sit with this question. Are you choosing a side, or are you choosing what is right? Because until we stop fighting imaginary enemies and start holding real people accountable for real harm, nothing changes. No pills, no teams, just truth. If this resonated with you in any way, let me know in the comments. Do you think that society is addicted to blame instead of accountability? And you know what? If you disagree, I also want to hear that, because honest conversation is the only way out of the illusion. I appreciate you guys for giving me 5 minutes and 55 seconds, and I will holler at y'all on the next go if you made it this far.